Shrines in their hearts they have for this nameless man, who refused to remember names. Names, names the Gestapo wanted. Tell us these names. Who are they? We want those names. And the man faced them, looked them in the eye, and hours passed. Hours and hours, and no names for the Gestapo. They told him they would break him, as they had broken others. The rubber hose slammed around face and neck. The truncheon, handling pain with no telltale marks. Or the distinction of a firing squad and death in a split second. The Gestapo considered these and decided for him something else. Tell us those names! Who are they? Talk names now or else! And no names came. Over and over and no names. So they broke the little finger on the right hand. 3 fingers came next, and the left thumb bent until it broke. Still no names, and there was a day and a night for rest and thinking over. Then again the demand for names came, and he gave them the same silence. And the little finger of the right hand felt itself twisted. Back, twisted till it hung loose from a bleeding socket. Then 3 more fingers crashed and splintered one by one, and the right thumb back into shattered bone. Did he think about violins or accordions he would never again touch? Did he think about babies or a woman's hair he would never again play with? Or of hammers or pencils that would always be misfit to him? He may have laughed half a moment of a Gestapo job. So now for a while, he would handle neither knife nor fork, nor lift to his lips any drinking cup handle, nor sign his name with a pen between thumb and fingers. And all of this was halfway. There was more to come. The Gestapo Wittenkraft had aim. They wanted it known in Norway. The Gestapo can be terrible. They wanted a wide, whispering of fear of how Nazis handle those who don't talk or tell names. We give you one more chance to cooperate. Yet he had no names for them. His locked tongue, his Norwegian will pitted against Nazi will, his pride and faith in a free man's way, his welcoming death, rather than to do what they wanted. They brought against us their last act of fury. Breaking the left arm at the elbow, breaking it again at the shoulder socket. And when he came to it, flickering of opening eyes, they broke the right arm, first at the elbow, then again at the shoulder. By now, of course, he lost all memory of names, even his own. And there are those, like you and me, and many, many others, who can never forget the man with the broken fingers. His will, his pride as a free man shall go on. His shadow moves, and his sacred fingers speak. He tells men there are 1,000 withering, shattering deaths. Better to die one by one than to say yes, 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 when the answer is no, no, no. And death is welcome, and death comes soon. And death is a quiet step into a sweet, clean midnight.
Coping with the knowledge that death is impending can be difficult, but at some point that dying person must deal with their immortality. This poem tells of a young woman who accepts her fate and has found peace and answers in nature. The Transparent Man by Anthony Hecht. I'm mighty glad to see you, Mrs. Curtis, and thank you very kindly for this visit, especially now when all the others here are having holiday visitors, and I feel a little conspicuous and in the way. It's mainly because of Thanksgiving. All these mothers and wives and husbands gaze at me soulfully and feel they should break up their box of chocolates for a donation, or hand me a chunk of fruitcake. What they don't understand and never guess is that it's better for me without a family. It's a great blessing, though I mean no harm. And as for visitors, why, I have you, all cheerful, brisk, and punctual every Sunday, like church, even if the aisles smell of phenol. And you always bring even better gifts than any on your book trolley. Though they mean all the good, families can become a sort of burden. I've got my father, and he won't come, poor man, because it would be too much for him, and for me too, so it's best the way it is. He knows, you see, that I will predecease him, which is hard enough. It would take a callous man to come and stand around and watch me failing. Now, don't you fuss. We both know the plain facts. But for him, it's even harder. He loved my mother. They say she looked like me. I suppose she may have. Or rather, as I grew older, I came to look more and more like she one time must have looked. And so the prospect for my father now of losing me is like having to lose her twice. I know he frets about me. Dr. Fraser tells me he phones in every single day, hoping that things will take a turn for the better. But with leukemia, things don't improve. It's like a sort of blizzard in the bloodstream, a deep, severe, unseasonable winter, burying everything. The white blood cells multiply crazily and storm around, out of control. The chemotherapy hasn't helped much, and it makes my hair fall out. I know I look a sight, but I don't care. I care about fewer things. I'm more selective. It's got so I can't even bring myself to read through any of your books these days. It's partly weariness, and partly the fact that I don't seem to care much about the endings, how things work out, or whether they even do. What I do instead is sit here by this window and look out at the trees across the way. You wouldn't think that was much, but let me tell you, it keeps me quite intent and occupied. Now all the leaves are down, you can see the spare, delicate structures of the sycamores, the fine articulation of the beeches. I've sat here for days studying them, and I've only just begun to see what it is that they resemble. One by one, they stand there like magnificent enlargements of the vascular system of the human brain. I see them there like huge discarnate minds lost in their meditative silences. The trunks, branches, and twigs compose the vessels that feed and nourish vast immortal thoughts. So I've assigned them names. There, near the path, is the great brain of Beethoven, and Kepler haunts the wide spaces of that mountain ash. This view, you see, has become my Hall of Fame. It came to me one day when I remembered Mary Beth Finley, who used to play with me when we were girls. One year, her parents gave her a birthday toy called the Transparent Man. It was made of plastic, with different colored organs, and the circulatory system all mapped out in rivers of red and blue. She'd ask me over, and the two of us would sit and study him together, and do a powerful lot of giggling. I figure he's most likely the only man either of us would get to know intimately, because Mary Beth became a Sister of Mercy when she was old enough. She must be 31. She was a year older than I and about 4 inches taller. I used to envy both those advantages back in those days. Anyway, I was struck right from the start by the seaweed intricacy, the fine-haired, silken-threaded filiations that wove like Belgian lace throughout the head. But this last week, it seems, I have found myself looking beyond, or through, individual trees, at the dense, clustered woodland just behind them, where those great, nameless crowds patiently stand. It's become a sort of complex, ultimate puzzle, and keeps me fascinated. My eyes are 20/20, or used to be. But of course I can't unravel the tousled snarl of intersecting rims, that mackled cinder grayness. It's a riddle beyond the eye's solution, impenetrable. If there's order in all that anarchy of granite mezzotint, that wilderness, it takes a better eye than mine to see it. It set me on to wondering how to deal with such a thickness of particulars. Deal with it faithfully, you understand, without blurring the issue. Of course I know within a month the sleeting snows will come, with cold, selective emphasis, with massings and arbitrary contrast, rendering things deceptively simple, thickening the twigs to frosty veins, bestowing epaulets and decorations on every birch and aspen. And the eye, self-satisfied, will be misled, thinking the puzzle solved, supposing at last it can look forth and comprehend the world. That's when you have to really watch yourself. So I hope that you won't think me plain ungrateful for not selecting one of your fine books. And I take it very kindly that you came and sat here and let me rattle on this way. Parents often feel loneliness when their child is gone. Sometimes memories of the past can help them to cope with that empty feeling. The Little Red Shovel by Lily Dorsheim. I'm sitting here in your room, son, with your letter in my hand. It came this morning, along with the rest of the news. Your father and I usually take your letters into your room and read them. You're much closer to us that way, it seems. Sometimes it's almost as if you are here, among the things you left behind. And your letters always tell us that you are all right, that we aren't to worry. But it's hard not to when we read the papers and listen to the newscasts. You said you'd been doing some shoveling. We almost laughed when you said you could have used your little red shovel. We almost laughed. You know, it's strange that you should say that, because I'm holding that little red shovel in my other hand. I picked it up as I came in here. I often do. It seems such a little shovel now, with the paint scratched and worn away. The blade is bent. But we keep it here in your room, the way you always did. Do you remember the day we got it for you? I can still see you when you picked it up that day in the store and refused to part with it. You ran down the aisles with your father close behind, laughing and reaching out for you. Finally, your father said, "Let's get it for him. It isn't everyone who takes to a shovel like that." You didn't even come inside when we got home. You had to try the shovel right away. How the snow flew. You didn't. Then sometimes you scooped the snow high into the air, and it came down all over you. Then you laughed and squealed and shook yourself, but you looked more like a snowman with each shovelful. It was cold, and you shoveled for quite a while. I was afraid you might catch a cold or get sick. You know how mothers worry about things like that. At last I called to you and told you to come inside. You wore a funny little fur cap and a brown woolly coat. You looked like a little brown bear standing there, the red shovel in your hand. Only little brown bears don't have red button noses and pink frosty cheeks, do they? You didn't want to come inside. Oh, you didn't cry or anything like that. You just said, "No." I don't think Napoleon himself could have put it any better. You stood there defiant, immovable, a little giant. With your red shovel in your hand, you defied the whole world, and especially your mother. Even though I was irritated that you should disobey, I could not insist against such innocent courage, my son. I closed the door, but I had hardly turned away before I heard the sound of little feet and the clanking of the shovel as you came inside. You looked at me as if you expected some harsh words for your defiance, but there were none. How could I scold a happy, tired snowman? That evening you played with your little toy soldiers. The battle began and the fighting was furious. There were great losses on both sides, and even some of the dead soldiers rose to fight again. But soon your eyelids drooped, and our little shoveler dropped off to sleep, right in the middle of a battle, and right on the battlefield. Your father picked you up and carried you into your bedroom. You smiled when you roused enough to ask for your little red shovel, and I placed it in your hand so you would go back to sleep. You sighed contentedly and smiled dreamily. I remember. I will never forget the day your father brought a little white rabbit home to you. You learned to love your friends so much. I cried the day you were gone and he got away. It wasn't anybody's fault. He just got away. I helped you hunt for him.